Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Rich Guggenheim, a whistleblower who is exposing the Colorado state government's seeming unwillingness to comply with federal policies. Well, Rich, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks. It's good to be here again.
Well, Rich, you found that the Colorado Department of Agriculture is violating a federal prohibition on DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And when you spoke out, you were retaliated against. So, Rich, can you explain how the Colorado Department of Agriculture is potentially violating federal law and how you were punished for pointing it out?
Sure. This started about a month ago. On November 6th, we had a managers meeting for the Department of Plant Industries. The Plant Industries division at the department had the agenda, and on the agenda, there were two things on there. One of them is inclusive leadership training, and they have a cohort that they're creating for the next calendar year. They also have a report that is being compiled for the governor's Colorado 150, which talks about Colorado for all, and it literally said a DEI report. And so those are two things that they're doing. I commented, this was a virtual meeting, so I commented in the chat that this is just DEI on steroids. And my division director, Wanderad Gabru, stopped the meeting and told me that that comment was inappropriate. And I told him on camera that I don't care. And he told me, good, it's on record that you don't care. I said, good. And then he told me to mute my microphone in front of all of the other program managers and section chiefs for the department division of plant science. And I said, no, it's on record that you are going to engage in viewpoint discrimination and silence anyone who isn't willing to go along with your agenda. So we muted it, and then we continued on with the meeting. And then later on, I sent him a private chat message and I said, just so you know, I have contact information for Pam Bondi and the Attorney General's office. And I, that day, sent a letter to Pam Bondi at the U.S. Department of Justice with the meeting agenda, three job announcements that we posted that day that have DEI statements in the job announcements, and a few other pieces of information relating to evidence that showed that we are continuing to push DEI in violation of President Trump's executive order. And we receive federal grant dollars. So that was a big, huge conflict of interest for me. I am a signatory on a federal grant. And as a signatory on that federal grant, I have a fiduciary obligation to point out when we are in violation of our contract and federal policy.
Wow.
Um, then about a week ago on Friday, I got an email from our director of human resources, Ruth DeCrecentis, and she had notified all of the program managers within the division of an investigation into violation of policy. And that letter was very vague. It does not discuss what the violation was, what the policy was. It's just un um, unsubstantiated claims and a non-defined violation of policy. So now I am being investigated by the state of Colorado for blowing the whistle, and they're trying to decouple it from my whistleblowing activities, and they're trying to frame it as Rich is being insubordinate and disrupting state functions. And so that's how they are framing it. And they are aware of the fact that I have talked to my congressman. I have talked to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. I've talked to their Office of the Inspector General, and also talked to the Office of Civil Rights and the State Personnel Board. It's before a State Personnel Board administrative law judge. I have asked that law judge to issue a temporary stay against this investigation, and the Colorado Department of Agriculture, the Human Resource Director, objected to that. So they are trying to move forward with this in violation of federal and state whistleblower protection laws.
Wow. Wow. So just to clarify for people, right? The federal government gives out these grants, and some of those grants go to the Colorado Department of Agriculture. And
Right.
within the requirements of those grants, getting that federal money, the state government or whoever receives those grants would be prohibited from using that grant money to basically go through with DEI type of programming, right?
Correct.
And why is that? I mean, DEI, diverse, for people who maybe are unfamiliar, even though it's been talked about a lot over recent years, but diversity, equity, inclusion inclusion, those sound like good things, Rich. How is this a bad thing? Why would the president or why would the federal government want to prohibit this from occurring here at the local level here in Colorado?
DEI really comes down to enforcing a Marxist agenda. And it's really true when you start looking at how within DEI are things like gender ideology, gender expression. Um, and there's a lot of racism built into all of this. And so we're eliminating the process of hiring people based off of merit. And we're making it so that we have to check certain boxes in order to go through with hiring people. And then part of the thing as a follow-up on this, it's the end of the calendar year, so I have certain performance reports that I have to send off to the federal government as a part of receiving those grants. I manage the CAPS program, it's the Cooperative Agriculture Pest Survey. So we monitor throughout the state for invasive pests that could pose a threat to our agriculture sector. And that's where this grant goes to. So I hire a program manager, and this program manager in her performance report literally stated that she had completed DEI training and the inclusive leadership training. And that is required by the state of Colorado for all managers to partake and complete this inclusive leadership and diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So I submitted a follow-up to the Department of Justice on December 5th when I got the letter from the Department of Agriculture here saying I was under investigation. And I provided them that document that shows that these managers in the department are taking this training and that this is what that grant is being used to subsidize. We are using that grant to subsidize the salary of an employee forced to take this type of indoctrination.
Yeah, direct violation. It sounds pretty clear to me that that would be a direct violation of the federal prohibition on using this federal grant money to push these DEI programs. I mean, it seems pretty crystal clear. So, I mean, what do they say? I mean, these other division directors and other people within the Colorado Department of Agriculture. I mean, do any of them agree with you? Do any of them see the problem, or do they not care? And because it's Donald Trump, they don't really care about following federal law. I mean, I don't want to mischaracterize people, but I mean, what's your experience been?
We have to understand one thing about this. This is going on in every department within the state of Colorado. And the Colorado Department of agriculture as a whole tends to be more conservative. So there are a lot of people who agree with me, but one of the problems that we also face at the Department of Agriculture is that it is a very hostile work environment. And as you can see, what they're doing in this situation by calling me out in the meeting and then putting me on an investigation in front of all of my peers in an effort to terminate my employment is a chilling effect. They want to silence anybody and they want to make everybody who thinks differently afraid to speak out about it. And one of the cases that we have about this was in the same meeting. We are talking about, we just had a retreat for our division, and we had employees who had received death threats and an employee that had a gun pulled on her. And she was sharing her experience about having a gun pulled on her in front of the Deputy Commissioner of Agriculture, Hollis Glenn. And he was literally checking his watch in the meeting. His body language was like, I don't care. I don't want to be here. Do what you think you need to do. So she went in later to her manager that week and resigned. And she said, I should not fear being retaliated against for sharing my concerns about my safety and my life on the job. And so when that came out in the program managers meeting with all of the division, I said, this shows that all of our talk about inclusivity is a farce because people who feel safe in the workplace don't fear retaliation for speaking out about problems in the workplace.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like a toxic or hostile environment for people to work. And this is a government agency. I mean, this is funded by our tax money at the local, at the state level, and the federal level. And it's like, they should be held to a certain standard, in my opinion, right? And all of us who took high school civics, you would think that, hey, these are government entities. They're supposed to be acting above board. They're not supposed to be really forcing indoctrination on people. But it's gotten so twisted in recent years. It's crazy. So I mean, with this federal prohibition on these DEI policies, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, let's get back to doing the business of government and really push out all this kind of Marxist ideology, and this kind of stuff that really pushes people into strange places. Because it is, I mean, would you say this DEI program stuff is overtly political in some regard?
Oh, I totally think it's overtly political and it's being pushed from the governor's office itself. And that's why we see it is so pervasive. One of the things I think a lot of people don't understand is when we're talking about the corruption within Colorado, a lot of people who are paying attention and plugged in are looking at things like Tina Peters, and they're looking at the situation with the Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, and they're saying, man, there's a lot of corruption. But until you are in the belly of the beast like I am, and you are working within the state agencies and you see how pervasive it is, this level of corruption is systemic and it is institutional, and it is driven from the top down. And one of the problems that we have is you can see that even in my case, the state government is flagrantly violating the federal policies and federal laws, and they do not care. They think that they are above the law. And so it's not going to go away until more whistleblowers within the state come forward and start talking about this and exposing it. And I also think it's going to be up to a lot of citizens to go out there and start doing Cora requests and pulling that information, which itself is a problem. I did a Cora request on myself, asking for all of the information relating to this situation within the department. That was a week ago. My work email has not gotten the Cora request yet. So somebody somewhere has blocked that Cora request from coming through. So this just shows how deep the corruption is in Colorado.
Wow. Well, I mean, Rich, it seems like, if somebody's working for the state of Colorado. They probably get good benefits, probably a good paying job. Why would somebody want to risk that to blow the whistle? I mean, was there a point with you where you just said, "Hey, I can't take this anymore. This is just going too far," or what was it? Because I imagine a lot of people out there who maybe are seeing the same things you're seeing just say, they're just gonna stay quiet. They're just going to go to work. They're going to cash their checks. They're going to focus on paying their mortgage and not being, vocal about what they're seeing. I mean, what was it that really pushed you to become a whistleblower, to speak out?
Well, absolutely. It is something like you have to realize that you're going to risk your job speaking out about this. Well, one of the things that we also have to understand is if this gets out there by some other means, and they're going to do an investigation at the federal government, which I hope they do, and they say, Rich, you knew about this and you never said anything about this. Now I become complicit in the cover up, and I myself can face federal charges. The other thing that we risk is this grant that funds this program really is designed to safeguard Colorado agriculture. And Colorado agriculture is something that I am a strong supporter of and a strong proponent of. We have a global footprint in agriculture right here. I can tell you because I certify our crops for export. We go all over the world. And we put that in jeopardy when we don't say something. And that's what this comes down to is I have a legal obligation, but I also have a moral obligation to speak out about this type of waste, fraud, and abuse, to protect agriculture and to protect the taxpayers in this country. Because this is our money and it's being abused by the state of Colorado.
Well, and two, I think the point of, how much money these agencies are getting through these federal grants, and then it's really for that purpose. It's that purpose to make sure that there's not these pests or these invasive species, or it's to protect the people, to protect the food, which is an important thing, right? And then how much of this money is being diverted to these social type of programs, these Marxist indoctrination programs, where they're pushing people into this and probably hiring people based on, hiring like a DEI specialist or paying for programs or investing all this time and energy into it. It's like, what a not just what a waste of taxpayer money, but yeah, like you said, they're totally kind of doing the opposite of what they're supposed to in terms of being a safeguarding and being a good steward of the taxpayer money that they're receiving. I mean, am I off base in saying that?
No, I think you're right on the money. And if you think about this is just one example of what's going on within the Colorado Department of Agriculture. And as I said, it's pretty conservative. Can you imagine how much more this is going to be seen if we start investigating things like the Colorado Department of Education or the Colorado Department of like the Health Department or Social Services? It is going to be rampant in those types of agencies. And so this really showcases just how embedded into our state culture and the government that we have put this. And the fact that they are willing to put me on investigation and flagrantly violate state and federal policies about this kind of stuff and move forward. In fact, it was just yesterday. There are three new job postings that came out, and every single one of those job postings has DEI statements. So the state of Colorado and the Colorado Department of Agriculture has made it known in light of this that they are going to continue pushing DEI initiatives.
Wow. Wow. And can you talk a little bit about the investigation? From what I read, it really was the same kind of day, or the timing just lines up that it seems obvious that this is why they're investigating you, is because you're blowing the whistle, you're raising alarm over these concerns of this violation of federal law. And it seems to me that the investigation was kind of just coincides with that. It's not like it's not like they've been investigating you for months before this happened, and then all of a sudden now you're coming out. It's like, no, it was like within. Can you explain that a little bit with the timeline of how that lined
Yeah.
up?
So I sent the first reports to the Department of Justice on November 6th. 29 days later, on December 5th, is when we got the notice of the investigation from Human Resources, and they have actually hired an outside attorney of employment law firm, and she's an attorney to come in and conduct this investigation. The purpose of that is so that the department can say, well, we were neutral, we weren't involved, we had an outside party come in and do it. Well, it's not neutral and it's not by any means non-biased. They have hired somebody that they know who they've hired, and they have tasked this individual, who, by the way, is now party to this whistleblower case, and they themselves can be held liable and contempt for violation of the whistleblower laws. But they have told them, this is what we are alleging, and your job is to go in and do an investigation to determine if this is in fact the case. And what the Department of Agriculture is telling this investigator is that I have been insubordinate and that I am trying to disrupt official state functions, and that I have created a dangerous and hostile work environment where people feel threatened because I told my director that I was going to send this to the Department of Justice. So they see that as a threat. And so they are trying to decouple this from the whistleblower and make it sound like I am a clear and present danger to the state of Colorado simply for blowing the whistle.
Well, I mean, Rich, how dare you question, the sacred dogma of our state government and the governor and his infinite wisdom, and they got to make examples out of people, right? To say, hey, listen, if you're not going to go along with the program, we got to get you out of here. Bring somebody in who does, and is not going to speak up about it. I mean, that's what it seems like to me.
That's exactly what it is. And it is an intimidation tactic. And they want to make a public example out of me so that they can send a message not only to other state employees within different agencies across the state, but also to the people of Colorado that we are not going to tolerate people speaking out against this and going against our agenda. And so that just shows how Marxist what this agenda all really truly is about. And the only way that we fight back against this kind of stuff is to continue to shine the light on it and expose it and talk about it. I really appreciate your time this morning sharing this. I would love to see this become a national headline. I think the other way we fight back against this kind of stuff is going to take the federal government coming in, doing these investigations, and hauling these people out in handcuffs. Because until people see real consequences, the state of Colorado is going to continue to act the way they do and think that they are above the law.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that would be a sight to see for sure. I think a lot of people would be happy about that for a lot of reasons, Rich. But, what would you say to somebody, Rich, who's maybe watching this, who's maybe in a similar situation, works for the state of Colorado or some sort of other government agency, and is seeing that federal grant money is being misappropriated and used in a way that is out of compliance with federal law? What would your message be to them?
Don't be afraid of the state government. I know there's going to be some bumps and bruises that are going to happen to me along the way. I'm probably going to lose my livelihood over this, but at the end of the day, the thing that I will come out on the other end of this, my integrity will be intact. And at the end of the day, if you don't say something and the federal government comes in and does an audit or does an investigation and finds out that you knew about this stuff and you were covering it up or failed to report it, you were complicit in that now. So it's really be brave and be courageous. I like to say that courage is a habit and courage is contagious. Don't be afraid to say something, and you are protected by both state and federal law. And so if I do lose a job, I look forward to the opportunity to challenge that. And I believe that when you blow the whistle, the other thing is you have the opportunity to recover those costs. And I'm not concerned about coming out on the top end of this.
Well, Rich, and kind of to wrap things up here, can you explain a little bit about your background on the Zoom call here? And I understand you've recently published a book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure did. I published a book called Escaping the Rainbow Plantation. If you haven't followed some of the work that I've done with an organization called Gays Against Groomers and speaking out against this gender ideology and the indoctrination, sexualization, and medicalization of our children. I've traveled across the country and I've spoken in legislatures. I've written legislation and I have been an active opponent to what we're doing to children under the guise of inclusivity. And that's where all of this stems from. When we understand that DEI is not inclusive at all, that it is really about a forced assimilation, it is about enforcing compliance, and that's the antithesis of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is why I speak out about that. So my book is talking about this very thing. I talk about how gender ideology undermines families as the foundation of our society, and I talk about how it has corrupted five pillars. I talk about those five pillars that are corrupted as being science, academia, media, medicine, and ironically, the last one is government.
Wow. We'll definitely have a link at freestatecolorado.com to your book and to the recent article in the Rocky Mountain Voice that kind of highlights your journey from becoming just a government employee to a whistleblower and the retaliation and the punishment that they're going after you with. So, Rich, I really appreciate your time, but more than that, I really appreciate your willingness to speak out, to stand up. Colorado and the country really needs people like you who are willing to put themselves on the line, put themselves at risk to speak the truth and to stand up and do more. I mean, that's I think one of the biggest things we're missing in our society. So I applaud you for your efforts and thank you. I know it can't be easy and got to be difficult and the prospect of losing your job and all of these types of things it's I can't imagine the stress and the worry there, but I really appreciate your efforts in doing it and hopefully you can inspire other people as well to use their voice, to stand up, to speak out, to really become a leader in terms of pushing back against all the wrong directions our state is going.
We all need to speak. That the tagline of my book literally is speak freely. So I want to encourage people to speak freely. Don't be afraid. The truth is a sanitizing agent against this type of darkness and these lies and this agenda. So speak out, speak freely, and fight back.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rich. I really appreciate your time. Please keep us updated with any new developments in your case, the whistleblowing, issue, and anything else. We appreciate you, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right. Talk to you later.